Welcome back to another episode of Just Mental. I'm your host, Kendall, and today we have a very special guest and a friend of mine, Alyse. We're going to be covering everything from childhood trauma to ADHD. If you're interested in learning more about Alyse, I will leave all of her handles and everywhere that you can find her in the description down below. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So let's jump in.
Yeah.
We both live in Strathmore, which is a pretty small town. Did you always grow up here or?
No, so actually, I always just say I'm from Strathmore. I'm actually from Carsland, so smaller town of 500, just down the old 817. I actually don't live in Strathmore. I'm just always in Strathmore. So, I actually live in Calgary in the southeast. So I'm just close to the exit there, so I can rip out to town anytime. But
Perfect.
yeah.
How would you say your childhood was growing up? Mom, dad, brothers, sisters?
Ooh, right to the cut. Well, I say that because it wasn't the greatest, if I'm being honest with you. My parents, I never knew them together. They separated when I was 3, I think. My mom, heaven on earth, she's actually passed away now. But my dad, never actually talked about my relationship with my dad, so I'll maybe just go a little light just because I don't know. So I first kind of dabble in that pond. So my dad, let's just say he's a great person, but his alcoholism is not. So it's just a lot of trauma from that. And when we say the word trauma, like for listeners, I don't want people to think that it's like, because there's so many levels of trauma, you know what I mean? So I'm not saying like there's like abuse and stuff like that, but it was just like the effects of things caused some trauma, if you will.
Emotional
Yeah.
trauma, mental
Yes,
trauma.
emotional. Yes. And you feel that in your body as an adult now, that's for damn sure. I have a brother and a sister. My sister is 10 years older than me, and my brother is 5 years older than me. We're all pretty, since I'm the youngest, my sister and I don't know, with the 10-year gap, she moved out when I was 8, right? So we didn't really stay too close. And with my parents' separation, it was kind of everywhere. But yeah, and then my brother lives in Spain, which is super cool. He's just a little nomad, so that's really cool. But
Did you
yeah.
ever feel lonely growing up?
No, I'll say no because I have literally the best friend group like I could ever explain. I call it my village. Like, even the neighbors in Carsland and just everybody, I just felt like I was always surrounded with like the best family. Even if I don't talk to them to this day, like just so everybody just had a peace in everything. I'd never felt lonely, which was really cool.
So you grew up in Carsland. What was your education, junior high, high school life like?
So it was good. Carsland School, elementary school is actually so nice. Like the town, you're like, but the school honestly is so beautiful. I loved every teacher I had. I loved Carsland Elementary. It was amazing. And then, so that's kindergarten to grade 6, and then I went to Strathmore to Crowther Memorial from 7 to 9, which was unreal. I don't know. I had such a good experience with teachers. I just felt like Strathmore and like Carsland, like because it's more country, right? It's more relaxed, and I'd say, but I've always called my teachers like by their last name, not Mr. or Miss, like some maybe more Mrs. But yeah, especially in high school though. The teachers, I went to Strathmore High School. And yeah, I loved them all. Like Mr. Fuel, I'd call him Patrick Fuel, or just Fuel. And now he's the mayor. So I'm like, okay, we gotta call you Mr. Fuel now. But just it's pretty wicked school system. I enjoyed it. A lot of people can't say the same. High school's kind of a rough go for some, but I was really grateful.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you do struggle with ADHD. Was that
Yes.
something that you noticed in high school? How did it affect the way that you were learning and that side of your life, socially, mentally?
Oh, girlfriend, want to see this list I got written down? Are you ready for it? Um, So yeah, so when I just backtracked like 5 seconds back where I said I'm super grateful I had such a great time in school, that was because my main uh, takeaway from school would be like the social aspect, not the school aspect, because from elementary school, like my parents didn't even, well, they did go to parent teacher interviews, but it was always chalked up to literally like verbatim. Alyse is a pleasure to have in class, but she talks too much and she's always walking around and just, and no one ever, like ADHD in girls, or even like back then, it's not something people just jump to, but it's so funny for boys. You see a boy who's hyperactive and, oh, that he's got ADHD for sure. But how often did you ever see a little, say, 10-year-old girl or 7-year-old girl be told she has ADHD? Like, not
Yeah,
barely
it
any.
doesn't happen.
So that affected my grades immensely. Like I actually had to go back for a semester in grade 12. Like I was so embarrassed because I just couldn't sit down and listen. Like even like if you were to explain like a board game, like a new board game to me, like rules and stuff, I just like I'm out because I can't sit and focus. Like it's to that point that, but yeah, in school, like I wrote down like what I just wrote ways that it affected my mental health growing up as say a kid to a teenager to an adult was I felt shame, I felt lazy, I felt stupid, I felt unteachable. And these are all things I'm saying to myself. No one is saying these things to me. But I felt like something's wrong with me. I felt that I wasn't respected because I wasn't smart enough. I just had low self-esteem. I wouldn't bother even trying. I would copy people on tests and be seen as that girl, like, oh, Lisa's copying again, move away. You know what I mean? And in my head, I'm like, I'm not that person. Like it just really, it just led to a lot of embarrassment and just struggle to just, be a part of the class. And I'll never forget, yeah, in grade 12, it was social studies. And I'm just so social. Like I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love talking. And but it's to the point where I can't sit for too long. Like I have to get up and walk around. And my teacher he had no time for that. He was not a fan of that. And he literally failed me by 1%. And I literally was like, whatever, I was just, my mom had already signed me back up to do the semester before I even could, move on. But yeah, I ended up going back and I had a different teacher and I actually did much better, which I like felt very good, I think, because I did have to put more work into it. And if I could go back to high school today, I feel like I would do so much better. But yeah, all those things, like, would you ever, like, you would never call any of your friends those names, and like that's me as a teenager. And that was my negative self-talk that surrounded my mind, because I was like, why can everyone else focus? Why can everyone else do school? Why is no one else stressed like I am? Like put a test in front of me, it's like instant anxiety. So I would almost argue that everyone who has test anxiety would maybe have a little bit of ADHD or maybe just severe anxiety, but I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
Did you ever feel like there was any support for you? Because you graduated 10 years ago. Is that
2012.
right around that time? So it
Yeah,
probably like mental health wasn't really something that was being talked about,
no,
like barely at
no,
all. Even now in schools and a lot of institutions, I don't think it's quite where it needs to be. So
absolutely.
what
No,
did
for
the
sure.
support system look like for you back then? Was there one?
Honestly, not really, because I didn't know why. I just literally like believed those things that, oh, you just can't do it. You're not smart like they are. I just believed it, and I didn't think of, oh, it could be something else, because it wasn't talked about. And social media, like, I'm not even that old and this makes me sound old, but like we didn't get Instagram until like grade 10, honest, like 2010, I think it was. I
Right.
could be wrong. But, and there was no posts of like psychologists or specialized doctors in certain things. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was none of that like there is now. So I can see say a teenage girl in high school right now going on Instagram and saying, oh, like this is how I feel. Maybe this is it. But where only thing I had back then was maybe like go home, like put on your dial-up internet and sit down and pick your favorite LimeWire song and then go onto Google and do a deep dive on Google if there's even much, or like it's probably Wikipedia at the time. But yeah, it's just not talked about like it is today. So it's just
Did
a whole different thing.
anyone ever suspect that that could have been going on? Like, was there anybody, there was nothing in your life that kind of hinted towards it? So what prompted you to,
There's so much of my actions that hinted to it. My actions were out of this world. I was like, if I can just quickly say, like, just symptoms of, because people always think ADHD, you think, you, in my head anyways, I think of instantly like a 12-year-old boy that's like pew, 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 everywhere, can't sit still, running around, talk, you know. But for women, we internalize these symptoms and we cope with them. We don't, it's like, sorry, putting it as an adult now for women, but like that can be things like like for myself, I'm hyperactive, impulsive. So I'm like fidgety, I'm like tapping my toes, bouncing my knees. I've struggled a lot with interrupting, because it's not that I'm trying to be rude, it's that my brain needs like blah, like if I don't speak this now, I'm gonna forget. So it actually, there's overspending. There's yeah, like being poor with your finances. Like it's not just being uppity and loud and this and that, like forgetting your keys, losing your stuff, you know, just not being able to complete tasks. Like there's just so much that goes into this, opposed to just being, you know, like the standard running around
and I
craziness.
actually did do a bit of research on that because I had seen a psychologist and then a psychiatrist for a
Mhm.
number of different things.
Yeah.
It was a crazy experience, but same thing. He said that I had ADHD tendencies, and I had never in my entire life anticipated that that was something that I struggled with. Just because, yeah,
Really.
stereotypically it's, well, if you're not running around 24/7 and you don't have all this high energy, then that can't possibly be ADHD. But it presents
Absolutely.
itself in so many different ways. So I think it's really interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah, like it's absolutely insane. I even like when I just hear stuff, I just write it all down on my phone. Sorry, it's just a lot, but I just write it down on my phone just to like remember and just understand, because I'm getting to learn more about myself now. And because there's so many things, there's trauma. Like for myself, I have grief with the passing of my mom, and that's led to dissociation, which is a huge issue as well. That they all kind of just like sister together. So undiagnosed ADHD, grief, which is from my dissociation is from my grief, and then I like toss some little anxiety in there, and you just had a messy little cocktail that, you know, that was tough to navigate. But yeah, it leads to so much more, like low self-esteem, depression, just negative self-talk. And it's, yeah, I'm just so glad it's being talked about.
For you specifically, when did you start to seek out, or because obviously if there isn't much information out there, what prompted you to go to a doctor? Did you go to a doctor or a therapist or anything like that to seek professional help?
So I've always done counseling. I've just always been a huge, and even if nothing's going on, I just love a good brain dump in a safe space and someone who like understands. So I can tell, like it's so weird. It's like people always like knew, but it's just never been like pinpointed. I'd say like I'd always joke, like friends would always joke too with me, be like, "Whoa, you have ADD or something." Like it's like you have ADD, but I would never be like, "Oh, I actually do." Like it's just a joke. I would just always, you know, be like, "Oh, you're just like that. That's just how I am." And yeah, because when your parents don't talk about it or anything, you're like, well, then how is this, you know, how is this? So I actually like what finally got me is I think as I've gotten older and hit my like mid-20s, I just, especially like being in the business I'm in, and just also like, so before I went full-time in photography, I worked in Calgary traffic court as a my last little job I did was ticket entry. So I'd enter all like speeding tickets and stuff like that. and we'd have this quota of numbers that we'd have to get like done in a day. And I just couldn't, like, my brain was literally like, I cannot, like, literally, I sat by a window and I'm like, bird, squirrel, like, I'm literally squirrel brain, like, and I had to get up and walk through the office, chat with people, and then I came back and then, oh, time to go for the day, you know. So those are things that I just kept getting bigger and bigger, and they just kept appearing more. And I finally saw an actual psychologist opposed to a counselor, because counselors much more surface level. So yeah, I saw a psychologist, and, or no, I'll backtrack, sorry. I saw this counselor and she had suggested it. And then I talked to my doctor and he said, oh, here, he's very nonchalant about it, which kind of was, well, it kind of bothered me a little bit. But at this point, there's all these Instagram posts and stuff. So I think it was just more encouraging and stuff. And more women like talking about it. So I was like, okay, let's see if this is what, you know, I think it is. And then at that point, I just knew. I was like, yes, every symptom I've read over and over is this. And the fact that I struggle reading this and not, my eyes like bounce off the lines, I'm like, oh, there you go, another symptom. So you can't even read what you're wanting to read about. So I actually went to he sent me to a psychiatrist, and he was asking me all these questions. But the demeanor he had and the tone that he set in that room was instantly, he's like, I'm in, like, without saying, he's like, I'm going to challenge you. And I know you don't have it. Like, I just got that vibe from him from the second I walked through that door. And after, he's like, no, you don't have it. You just have a lot of trauma. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I got my psychologist, and she instantly was like, okay. She's like, we need to structure our conversations. And she's like, you're giving off many symptoms of ADHD. And she's like, here, I'm going to send you an assessment. And then it's weird because I went to my doctor and I told him this, and then he instantly was like, okay, yep, here's some meds. And I was like, huh? I'm like, I've gone through all this mental anguish for you to just be like, here's some meds now? Like, oh my Lanta. So like, I'm grateful that I know that I'm like actually diagnosed now, but it was just really frustrating to see how quick he was just able to write up a prescription after, you know, my psychologist said it. It's just strange. Like, you really have to advocate for yourself, because if someone can't afford a psychologist to be told this or get the assessment, because they're expensive, like they're in the thousands, it's just like, what do? You need someone to advocate for you. You need to advocate for yourself. So
I 100% agree. I think mental health care in Canada specifically, I think everywhere it's not accessible. Most people can't access the resources that they need. Family doctors just don't know. It's not that they're not educated on it, but they just don't know enough to be able to properly assess, diagnose, and then treat.
For sure. Like,
I
early
went through
intervention.
something very similar when I first got diagnosed with depression. And I was the kind of person that was like, that could never happen to me. There's no way that this is what's happening. Just complete refusal and denial to believe that this was what my life was like. And same thing, they just threw me on medication. It ended up not working, but it creates this distrust in the system, especially with doctors.
Absolutely. Like the how quick he was able to just give me that. I literally was like, that's it. Like, he obviously was like, check in how you feel after, but I'm like, so everything I've been telling you for like a year prior, because I would bring stuff up, and he just didn't really, you know, care too much, I guess. I don't know, or just didn't understand, or I don't know. It was just very strange.
So going back to the period of time when you were first getting diagnosed and seeing that psychologist and finally, in a sense, feeling validated, which I'm sure was a huge thing for you.
Oh, huge.
Can you walk me through what that was like?
Just, yeah, like, just like knowing that I wasn't lazy, stupid, unteachable, all these things, like all those horrible things I was telling myself for so many years. Because the sad part is you believe it after a while. Like, my girlfriends would joke, because my last name is Lakeman, and another symptom is time. So my punctuality was so poor, if I could talk to my supervisor in traffic court, she would literally, like, we would joke about it at the end, but I was late all the time. And it's not that I chose to be late, it's that I can't get my ducks in a row. Like, it was just very hard. And so my girlfriends actually call me Alyse Lateman because I'm always late all the time. So we joke about it and it's fine. But I literally would say to myself, like, what the hell is going on? Like, get your ass out of bed. Why can't you be on time? And it's just such, like, you're just constantly going and going in your brain, and it's just sometimes it's hard to just like be at surface level. And so just knowing that I actually have it, and then getting, I don't love medication, I'm not a big meds girl, but I take Vyvanse, and I find it like I can, the first day I took my Vyvanse, holy, can I swear on here? Sorry, because
Yes, we just have to like bleep it out on YouTube, but
okay, holy, you'll figure out what word. Sorry, I'm such a trucker mouth. But the first day, so I live in an apartment. It's not huge by any means, but there's definitely stuff that I have to do, and there's like little things, like I have little piles here and there of like on my counter of like, this goes into the cabinet, blah blah blah, like just stuff like that. And then, which is another symptom. But so I took my Vyvanse and I almost wanted to like test myself, and I literally organized, not even kidding you, Kendall, my whole apartment. I organized it. And then I remember there's like one last task. And then, so a normal day, I'd be like, yeah, good one. Go sit down, go scroll your phone, dissociate for 2 hours, look up, and then notice, oh, it's nighttime. But I literally was like, nope, we're going to do this. We're going to try. And I freaking did it. And I literally cried. I'm not even kidding you. I cried because I was like so used to just not being able to do anything more than what, my brain would do. And then it's like, what I would do when there's things to be done is I would just sit down and be like, I get so overwhelmed, like literally to do, say, unload the dishwasher and reload it. Like those little things, like I'm sure you can agree. And I just would just sit down and just like be so overwhelmed. And then you go, oh my God, you can't even load a dishwasher. And then that's when the shame cycle starts. So that day that I took it and I did that task, I was literally like, woo! Like it was so wicked. I was so stoked, and it was just a damn good day.
aw.
It
Did
was
you
a dear
ever
diary.
did you ever feel, what is the right word that I'm looking for? A lot of the times when you go undiagnosed with something, even if you have an idea of what it could possibly be, there's almost this, I talked about it a little bit before, but a denial that that could be happening to you. Did you
Sure.
experience something like that?
Not really. It's pretty like, if you were to interview like even 3-4 of my friends, they would be like, because I'm just very much like that. Like it's it's me, I've obviously learned to cope with it and deal with it now, but I've never been in denial about it. I've always known something was up, like as I got older, because when you're younger, like teenager, that's when our emotions and crap are everywhere. So we're like, I suck, so I believed it, but now as an adult, I kind of felt, I was
How
like,
did
this is
how did your ADHD, looking back, because obviously maybe whether you knew or not, how did that
Mhm.
affect your relationships, romantic,
Oh,
friendships?
oh, you got time? I was kidding. It just being late, just memory is huge for me, like memory loss, like forgetfulness. And I think like my last relationship was 8 years, and I think like he knew, he dealt with it obviously, but it definitely like takes you places. Like it actually like, not being able to like do my laundry, I'd have like piles of laundry, and he'd be like, why can't you just do laundry? Like not rude or anything, but just like there's just
Right.
so much. You feel like a slob. You feel like, you just want to sit on the couch and not necessarily sit on, like, you know what I mean? You just want to like not do these. If there's too many tasks, it's like a big monster, and you just want to like close that closet door and sit on the ground in the dark, and then just with me, like, just mix my grief in there. It was just like, it was a lot to go on, and just it's just so much mental exhaustion.
What was one of the, obviously, when you struggle with mental health, whether it's anxiety, depression, ADHD, I can speak to my personal experience that your partner, in a sense, definitely bears a lot of the brunt of what you're going through, especially if it's someone that you really trust, you feel safe with. Um, did you ever feel like you were a burden to anybody in your life for what you were going
Always,
through?
always. Yeah, always. I always would say that to myself. Just always felt like a burden,
Was there
for
anything that
sure.
helped you, or anybody that helped you kind of pull yourself out of that?
I think just like putting myself in therapy really helped that. But friends too, just talking it out, like, all the time, they just remind me, you're not a burden, you're human. And I have a great support system. But yeah, I would say therapy, just because I can dive deeper into, because you're not gonna, certain things like overspending and stuff, like, you're not gonna really, well, you could chat with your girlfriends about it, but you don't, just to go a little deeper into stuff like that, and mental exhaustion, and just there's just so much that goes with it. Like, it's insane. Like, just everything I like, even like how I write. Like, look at how I write. Like, for those people who can't see, obviously, it's just everywhere. Like, I'm not like a line. I'm like pew 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 pew. Like, this stuff is just everywhere.
I think it's interesting that a lot of us, we talk about having a support system, but at the same time, you feel incredibly lonely at times, like you're a burden, like I mean, I went through a stage where I just felt like it would be better if I just wasn't here. And I think
Oh, Kendall.
you really, it really puts things into perspective when you finally find the help that you're looking for, that you really need. I remember I'd been to a therapist before, and I went to my second therapist. She was recommended by a really good friend of mine, so I trusted that opinion, and it turned out to be like a fantastic experience. But
Good.
for you, speaking more to that, how has the therapy helped you, A, heal, and B, kind of find the resources that you need to be able to, I don't want to say a normal life, because I don't think a normal life exists, but I guess just to
Exactly.
function at a, I guess, a productive level would be the right way to put it.
I just say, like, and I'd also say too, if we can go back on the Vyvanse, like, I always just, because there's like, while I was talking to a friend about it, in front of me were coasters on a coffee table. So I said, because some people don't understand ADHD, they just instantly go to what the norm is of ADHD, which is hyperactivity. So I like saw all these coasters, and I just showed my friend. I said, this is how I felt without my medication. And it's all of it stacked on top of each other. So say there's an issue underneath, and they're all stacked. So with the Vyvanse, I'm able to take those coasters off individually and deal with each situation individually to come to the final conclusion. And you know what I mean? And it takes loads off, and it just helps you, you know, let's start with number one. Let's go to number two, instead of, holy shit, we're at step 8. Well, we didn't finish 2. It just going everywhere. Sorry, I swore actually this time. Bleep. Just kidding. But it's just it's so compounding at times. And it's like the Vyvanse for me, it took that load off, and I was able to go through each step, opposed to having to do steps 1 through 12 in 1 second, which is what my brain wanted to do. So yeah, therapy, just like, because what I'm really focusing on, like, right now in my life, is just being like truly authentic. Because I would say growing up, I always like thought of myself as like the weirdo, because I'm very unfiltered. I'm very, like, I guess I'd say authentic, but like I viewed that as being like weird and different, and like sporadic because of my ADHD. So now that I'm really like deep diving into like my true authenticity and like actually like putting ADHD in that realm, and just just learning to talk it out when I need to. And calendar, like the thing that I was thinking about today actually is because people always say like for a way to like remember stuff with ADHD is just to write it down. So I have calendars. I have a calendar on my phone. I have a weekly little thing that I write on, and then I have a big ass sorry again that the swear big butt calendar on my counter. And then like for this page, like I wanted to show you this too. This is just like I literally wrote on my mind. So when I don't take my meds or something, then I just like write what I want to do or what I think about. And then I can go back later and like look at like Canadian Tire home edit storage stuff, like just random stuff, but it's what goes on in my brain. So I think just like writing stuff down really, really helps. But with therapy, I'd say she just like really helps me understand that this is something out of my control, and all I can do is just find these coping mechanisms, like grounding myself, and boundaries are huge, and just really like trying to be more like mindful and just do things that are very calming. Like my girlfriend and I, we go to yoga a lot. And that's really helpful because you shut your mind up. Well, you can try to shut your mind off anyways, but yeah, just like I don't know, therapy just really helps you like understand that you can be you're a human being, and we're all so different, and to take that negative self-talk away. And just like the positives about ADHD though, I will say is like, yeah, I feel like I'm like highly effective in like fast-paced situations. Like I do feel like that, like in a chaos too, I feel like I can actually manage it well. I can like, it's like my controlled chaos in a way.
Right.
I don't know. It's like weird. Some people are so like OCD and need things to be this, and this, but honestly, I work better in like a little bit of a mess.
I
But
actually,
it's my
when I first went to therapy, with the therapist that I ended up staying with and trusting a bit more, she said something, and I feel it's relevant here. She basically said, Kendall, if it weren't for your special mind, you would not be who you are or have accomplished what you've accomplished to date. And I think that's a really important reminder that if you didn't have ADHD and if I didn't have depression or anxiety, it impacts your life in great ways just as much as it impacts it in the more negative ways. Have you
Amen.
experienced any of that? Like, I know you just talked about it a little bit, but success driven stuff, what positives have come out of this, if any?
My business, my beautiful baby business. It's like I feel so creative. I feel like things that I like see through my lens are things that other people don't. And I feel like that is so beautiful to me. That's my power. And I've always like viewed things so differently. I've always been the friend who's taking photos and stuff and saying, stand here, stand there, do this, do that kind of thing, just to create that bigger picture. And yeah, like I feel like it's ADHD has like kind of stemmed my mind. It's a struggle. Like I don't know, maybe I'm more bothered by it than say my clients, but say I'm like doing wedding bride and groom shots, and it's like like if I pose them, sorry, I should be Italian, I'm such a hand talker. But I'll pose you, right? And if I see like something before the pose is even ended that's like almost better, I'll be like, blah, blah, blah. Like I just jump in and I'm like, let's do this pose. And then my clients are like, huh, you just told us to do this. So that part I kind of struggle with, but it's just because my brain is just like firing on all cylinders and like pew, 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 like pinballing everywhere. But I feel like it brings those cool things to fruition. And the like stuff in my brain, like I'm sure you can agree, like you have ADHD as well, like the stuff in your brain, sometimes you're like, do I tell people this? You're like, these thoughts are so strange and they're so like random. I'm such a random person, like honestly, because I'm actually going to be starting a podcast like I told you in our messages, and one little segment I'm gonna be doing is song of the day, because I will literally be like, wake up and I'm like, the Moffats. I'm like, or like the other day, you know, I'm just like thinking of like an old song, or like just like the most random. It could be like a happy birthday to, yeah, and the next day is like Shania Twain, you know, so it's just wild and crazy. I don't know. Back to this, but I'd say how it's beautiful. Like, I just feel like the beauty of like being creative. I feel like ADHD has brought so much creativity to my mind, and really like just ideas that I get. Like, for instance, I just went on a solo trip to Victoria. Um, and that's something I wouldn't do. If you were to catch me a year ago, like, I'm not the same person. Like, I'm really not. Like, therapy and being diagnosed with ADHD, like, in meds and stuff, like, I feel like I like shed a skin. Like, I'm actually like authentically me. And like, to go on a solo trip, I'm I'm like, oh, scary, anxiety, no, thank you. But now, you know, I was like, I really want to take photos of the ocean. I want to ask a random couple to let me take their photos. And I remember like 2 days before I booked my flight, I was like, you know, like that old ways, that old programming popped in there. And then I was just like, just do it. And then I did it, and literally had the best time ever, met the best people. And yeah, I just felt like I trusted that authentic thought, and that, you know, that was meant to happen for me. And yeah, so I did it, and it was great. And then I just self high-fived. It was awesome.
That's incredible. I actually, it's funny that you bring up that you have all these ideas, and like the creativity aspect is huge, because I feel like that's something I've always loved, the creative aspect of things. I like coming up with things. I feel like I don't like the monotony of a normal job. Like sitting at a desk for 8 hours is
Oh, it's
horrendous. And
horrendous. I work for
my
the government, so it's, yeah. Anyway, you get it.
my business partner, actually, she amazing, amazing person. We started talking and conceptualizing business ideas, and my mind was just like, okay, we could do this, we could start a clothing company, we could do this, we could do this. And she told me recently that every time I text her, and I'll text her at like 10 o'clock at night because that's when everything comes to me. And she
For
said, "Kendall,
sure.
I
Yep.
have a notebook that I write in. Every time you text me, it's a new idea." And she's written down every single thing I said. And I'm like, I can't even remember that stuff. And
Yeah,
it's just incredible. It's
we
crazy.
need friends like that, honestly.
Yes.
I have a best friend, her name's Mel. Literally she will be like, oh my God, like, you were just talking about this 2 months ago. And I'm like, huh? I'm like, thank you, because I don't remember any of this. Like, I literally joke all the time to my friends. I'm like, I should be putting a GoPro like strapped to my head so I can remember what I say or what I do. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff that I'm like, it's really sad though when you're having, so yeah, before I actually started therapy, I was scared because I was like, I do not want to spend, you know, my time and my like money's whatever with, you know, we like, when it comes to investing in yourself, I don't really, to me, that's, some people, you know, get their nails done, get their hair done, all that stuff. I mean, I do too, but like, investing in like your mental health, I feel for me, that's important. So when there's a cost with that, I'm like, okay, you just spent how much on skip the dishes? You know, you can spend it on your mental health. So anyways, but I was just really like scared about that, I'd say. And then because I was scared to also forget, because in my counseling, and this is why actually had to, I've never like fired a counselor before. I don't say I fired her, but she just like didn't, I need to be held accountable and I need to have consistency. And I just didn't feel like that was very consistent at all. Like, she'd like give me homework, but then she wouldn't like bring up the homework after. So
Mm.
I'm like, oh. And then the times I would remember, I was all excited. And then she's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, no, not a good fit. So um yeah, that just wasn't good. But yeah, with the psychologist, I told her that at the beginning though. I was like, I'm very concerned about like forgetting what we talk about. I'm like worried about you know, but she just said like write it down. And sometimes I think I'd like to record it on my phone and just listen back, because that's how bad it has to be sometimes. Like, it's memories like trash. You even like when I shoot like weddings and stuff, people will message me or I'll see them out on the street or something and they're like, "Hey, how are you?" And I'm like, "Damn it." I'm like, "Good, you?" And I feel so bad. Like, it genuinely makes me really sad. Like, I hate forgetting people because I'm such a people person. So when people are like, "Remember we talked about this?" And I'm like, yeah. Can you remind me? I have to like learn things to say of like, can you please remind me? Or um just, yeah, I'm sorry. It's tough.
my friends, I played for state basketball team,
Oh,
and
awesome.
I had a core group of friends on the team that would always bug me because I was the same way. I forget stuff all the time. I forget my wallet. Every trip I go on, I forget to bring something. Usually it's a toothbrush or like something simple
Yeah.
like that. And it's crazy because I used to think, oh, well, that's just how it is. Like, that's just how I am. I'm also very messy. And
Mhm.
I read a study that said that like the most creative people tend to be messier because they just don't have time to think about that kind of stuff. Like, they're not thinking about putting away their laundry or vacuuming
Totally.
their carpets or whatever other trivial things have to happen in a day. And I just find it
Sure.
really interesting because now I still don't think people talk about this enough. Like, I don't see
No.
it very often. Um, but has there been things that you've now learned? I know you talked about a couple of them, but traits and things that have shown up in your childhood and now into your adulthood that you're like, oh, okay, that's why I do that. That's why I do that.
For sure. That also goes hand in hand with inner child trauma as well. So I don't know if you know much about that or if you're into that, but that's a whole new ball game. When people hear inner child, it kind of sounds a little weird to a lot of people, especially like grown men and stuff like that. They're like, huh? But I'd say a lot of it was like inner child trauma, like traits from there. Like just things like not having like a safe place to talk or a safe space to just like be your authentic self and stuff like that. But that is where ADHD is stemmed from, is when you're a child and you go through trauma. So that's actually does stem into ADHD. So I'd say, well, just like once I got diagnosed, I just understood myself more, just of like being a goofball all the time and like, because there's something I learned is when you see somebody who's the loudest person in the room, and I'm speaking on this because this was me, is when you're the loudest in the room, you want to make people laugh all the time. You want to, that's you. This is again speaking of me, but that was me projecting and wanting to keep everyone else at bay so I didn't have to talk about myself and my inner issues and my because I did have depression as well. I was on Wellbutrin for like a year or so. And so that's me being the loudest in the room and always like it's like I'm like, all right, time to put your outfit on or your uniform on. You're gonna go be a comedian now. So that actually got exhausting and nobody asked me to do that. And I didn't know why I did that until I went to therapy and learned more about myself, that I'm just instantly deflecting. And I could not, if you and someone were to have like a healthy debate or something in front of me, I used to be so uncomfortable that I would want to like make jokes, that I'd be like, oh, just grab a line and make someone laugh. Or, and a lot of times they'd be like, at least it's not the time. But I would just be so uncomfortable with that. Because I just wanted everyone to be so like happy and, fun. And another thing too is like if you because with ADHD you don't have control over things, like, but in life as well, like you don't have control. But when you are a person who comes from an unsafe environment, and the word unsafe isn't just because when you say, oh, I'm unsafe, you mean like you're going to be harmed, but like I mean like unsafe in the sense of like, not is chaotic and unpredictable, I'll say that. So when you're coming from an unpredictable upbringing, you don't feel safe and you go to fight or flight. So your body's instantly like, you feel so much trauma in your hips. Actually, I don't know if you knew that, but we carry all our trauma in our hips, which is insane. but yeah, so with that, see, this is now my brain's like bing. But just, yeah, with that, not feeling safe and stuff like that. I'm trying to think where I'm going with this. I think I have it written down. I'm so sorry,
No,
Kendall.
it's okay. It's okay.
To just because I've always been like loud. I've always been like I'd say that's just my personality. But like with these things, you have to decipher what is authentically Alyse, what is ADHD, and what is inner child trauma, and what is my grief. Because I'm coming from components. Like I'm not just oh, I'm sad today, oh, I'm happy today. Like there's so much more that has happened in my life. But yeah, I would definitely just like ADHD. My room, I had a photo of my room as a kid, and holy frig, I don't know how I'd make my bed and be like, wow, I am clean and organized. Mind you, you look down on the floor and you got a pile of laundry. If I were to show you my closet right now, I literally, do you know Claire from Claire Living Co?
Yes.
Shout out to Claire, she's amazing. I showed her my closet and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. She's like, don't be embarrassed. Like she's so kind about it because I just asked her ways to help like organize, because everything, I have like a folded bin of clean clothes, but it's like heaping and it's just not cute. It's not nice. Mind you, I don't have people in my closet, so that's great. But it's like just that's my organized chaos. That's my I'm going back to my control. Sorry.
No,
Here,
it's
let me jump.
okay.
Tell me you have ADHD without telling me you have ADHD. So yeah, when you're in a place where you feel, oh my God, and now I just forgot it. Are you kidding me? Send help.
It's okay.
No, that control. You have to control things in your life. So I'll go back to my previous relationship. I came from feeling so unsafe all the time that now I'm like, oh, I'm an adult, so I need to control everything so I feel safe. But I didn't know that. It just like naturally happened from my like subconscious mind. Like if you'd say that, maybe that's the wrong term, but I like had to control everything. And when it didn't go in my way, I would get so upset. And I
And what did
sounded like
that look like? What did that look like for you, like in terms of
a fight
manifesting?
with my a fight with my boyfriend. Like, and I wouldn't know. I'll never forget, like, we were going somewhere and he didn't drive a certain direction. Mind you, this was like when my trauma was like very, very bad. And this was like that was like the catalyst almost to actually go into my growth journey that I had last year. But yeah, I had to be controlling, like to the point where I wouldn't say like a toddler, like I wouldn't have a temper tantrum by any means, but I remember I got so upset with him because he wanted to do something that I didn't suggest or something like that. And I remember getting so mad, and then I was driving, or no, he was driving, and I looked down at like where the cup holder is in the door, and I remember looking down and staring at it and being, Alyse, why are you mad right now? Why are you mad right now? Why is this happening right now? I just didn't like it. That's when it was starting to like peak out to be like, Alyse, why are you acting this way? Because that's what comes from, this is more so I guess childhood trauma stating. But yeah, those certain actions, were just very bad, because it's external. Like you don't want to be this person, but these like things that have happened to you, like they act, it's like they're little puppets that speak upon and like through you, and then you just have to quiet those down. But I would say though, with ADHD, I'd say a lot of people should really go and dive deep into their inner child and inner child healing. That's a big, big, big one, because we are all sponges when we're born, no matter where we are in the world, what we're doing. And we are all faced with these things in life and these situations and these, environments. And that is how we grow to be the way we are. So when parents say, oh, my kid, you're so bad, it's like, how could you even say you're so bad? Because this child has learned from you. And I don't mean to shame any parent in any way, but this is generational trauma. This is like generational inner trauma. So like think about like years and years back when there's like the war and the Great Depression, people aren't happy. And then what do? They they hit their kids, they leave their kids, they verbally abuse their kids, and then it just gets passed down. And then it comes to our generation here, And now we are speaking about it. And a lot of people are so effing uncomfortable right now, like so uncomfortable. And it's, you never want to say to your parent, you're a bad parent, because you're not a bad parent. You are just doing what you were taught to do as a parent from your parents, you know? It's just, it's such a tough window with that, because you don't ever want to shame anybody, because you learn from what you know. But that's, if you go back to your inner child trauma, like bring it right back to, I always say little Alyse. And I'm like, at first when I heard about that, I was like, how embarrassing. But I needed to talk to that little girl, and I took a photo of myself as like a 5-year-old girl, and I like looked at her and I just said, I'm so sorry for what you went through, but I got you now. And that is so powerful. Like I got goosebumps even saying that, and I'm saying that about myself. It's because it's just so powerful. And you know, and I challenge you, Kendall, to say that to little Kendall, because those things are out of our control. And when we're in those situations, that no shit, I got ADHD. You know what I mean? Like I was just born, I mean, maybe to have it, but like you scramble when you're in fight or flight, you like scramble to like grasp safety, you know, just things like that. And I think that just really stems into your brain, because like self-regulation is a huge thing too. And like I really struggled with self-regulation, and you know, no wonder my brain is left, right, and backwards, you know. So I definitely like, just, yeah, I challenge everybody to go back to their inner child, and or just, you know, whenever there's because there's always one event in people's lives that they can go, oh yeah, I remember that as a big one.
Right. I think I actually had an interview with a trauma therapist,
Oh, did you?
and
Wow.
he brought up an interesting statistic that I think it was, I'd have to double check this fact, but 80 to 90% of all disease, the biggest risk factor is trauma, childhood trauma. And
I know.
you think about that and you're like, well, nobody ever really talks about how influential those like first couple of years are. Like you don't hear someone say, "Oh, well, I have depression because when I was a kid, my parents never asked me how I was doing." And that's
Absolutely.
why. And it's crazy to think that if you go back and you, like you said, if you actually sit there and you think about what you
Mhm.
went through and what, because you can have a great life and that doesn't mean that you didn't still struggle. I think that's another big thing is
Totally. And you know what's crazy is I asked a friend who has amazing parents. Her parents are still together. They're literally so loved around the community. They're such great people. And because I was explaining this to a group of friends, and she was thinking, she's like, how would, she's like, oh, I don't know if I have it. But then the next time we hung out, she actually stated, she's like, you know what? She's like, it comes up in different ways. Like for me, mine would be, say, my needs not being met properly by my parents. But for her, she's like, because inner child stuff, it goes directly also, and it shows up a lot in our romantic relationships. So with her, she was like, I love my boyfriend and everything, but I'd get so upset with him when he wasn't doing things the way I wanted him to do things, or the way I was shown by my dad that they were done. So that was her struggle. It's like she had to learn to accept her boyfriend for who he is and how he does things, because she was so like drilled in her mind, like, I want someone just like my dad and who does it perfectly just like my dad, you know. So she's like, that was a big challenge for me. And I'm like, oh, like it was actually really cool for me to see that from that perspective, because when you come from such, you know, craziness in your upbringing, and you see someone that's, you know, super healthy, you're like, well, what could you possibly have to worry about, you know? But everyone has their story, obviously. But when she told me that, I was like, wow, that is so interesting to see it on the other side of that.
and I think at times it can be more difficult because you push it down because you look at everybody else. And that's a really big thing is comparison, comparing your trauma to someone else's or your problems to someone else's. Never, like that's the worst thing you could possibly do. But you, for example, if I looked at some of my friends who maybe did have divorced parents and I'm looking at my life, I'm like, well, I don't really have much to complain about because my family is still together. And I think a
Right.
lot of people just push that down and they almost deny themselves the ability to feel acknowledged because they refuse to think that their life could be as bad as, say, someone else, because comparison is such a huge thing.
Oh, it is. Yeah, just because my parents are separated doesn't mean my trauma's worse than yours. Like it's, yeah, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, everyone deserves to be validated regardless of every situation.
Growing
That's
up, did you ever feel like there were people in your life who did invalidate you besides that initial doctor? Because that's kind of what that situation was like.
yeah. Seeing like honestly from like dissociation from like stuffing things down from being a teenager, I wouldn't say like invalidated, but just like never like, well, it's weird. My mom was like, you can do anything. My mom literally like was like, you can go to space tomorrow if you wanted to. You could save the world. Like that's how my mom viewed me. And I'd always be like, are we on the same, do we have the same eyeballs? Like, but um my dad, seeing this is, I don't know, this is weird for me to talk. I've never talked about my dad on anything like that's going to be presented, but um I don't know, he didn't ever like invalidate, but he just didn't like encourage. He didn't, because like I always say, hurt people, and from me learning about my inner child trauma, I've learned to have more compassion and understand my dad more because of his parents and his upbringing. But that
Right.
doesn't obviously invalidate what he did to me, or not saying did to me, but like emotionally, stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know, I would just say like, you as a girl looking up to her dad, like for that support or those, really hard times, like I'll never know. Maybe, I don't know, like as a teenage girl though, I'll never know what it's like. I can't go be a teenager again in those crucial moments and stuff like that of like, I really wanted to be validated by my dad a lot. I craved that. I tried so hard, but when someone doesn't have the emotional capacity, it's like, how can you? Like you were saying, how, I'm not sure if you're just like saying this generally, but like if your parents asked how you're doing or they didn't ask how you're doing, it's because when people don't ask, it's either A, they're not interested, or B, they're not emotionally mature or have the emotional capacity to carry what you're about to tell them. You know what I mean? That's what it goes for, like the, hey, how are you? Good, thanks, you. It's because, are you going to say, I'm actually not doing good today, I'm having a really bad mental health day? You know what I mean? And it's like, it depends on the person. Like, can you sit there and say, what's going on, I'm here for you, opposed to like, oh, I'm really sorry, that sucks, you
Well, and
know?
I think that's the problem with, I'm going to speak a bit to Bell Let's Talk. I think it's a
Yeah.
great initiative. I applaud a company that wants to put money behind a mental health campaign. But when you talk about at its core, asking people to share their stories, and then a lot of the times people are saying, if you ever need anything, you can come to me. If you're struggling, please reach out to me. What capacity do a lot of people have to actually take that on? That's where my concern is, because it's
Mhm.
one thing to say that you're going to be there, but it's a completely different thing to actually make the space to do the things that you say you're going to do. And that's something I've always struggled with
Yeah,
friends and
absolutely.
relationships.
Totally. Like when my mom passed away, the biggest thing people said is, I'm here for you if you need to talk. And it's like, no offense to these people, but it's tough. And in any sense, it's like, you don't really, it's not as appetizing. I don't use the word appetizing, but it's not as like, I'll say, yeah, appetizing to speak to someone who doesn't even know what you're going through,
Right.
or even have a taste of what it's like, you know. Obviously that doesn't mean someone can't still be there for you, because there's a difference in like talking to someone for to be heard, or like to, be validated and just have like kind of like a safe space to speak, or you get it, someone wants to offer you advice, and it's like, you don't always need advice, you just want someone to hear you. And but it is the no, like most natural thing to hear is, if you need anything, we're here for you. It's just, even for don't want to call out my dad, but like, when I would call him at nighttime at 3 a.m. crying about my mom being gone, all he could say was, I know, I'm sad too, or I miss her too. And it's like, I know you miss her, but I need more from that. I need you to like talk this through, even if I'm repeating myself 4 times, even if all I'm doing is heavily breathing and crying in the phone, you know, it's because I know he wanted to be there for me. I know he did, but I just don't think he knew how to be there for me,
Still
because
have a relationship with your dad?
um no, it's really hard for me because I knew my dad pre-alcohol, and that guy was really, really awesome. And I'm not saying he's like, I don't know, an alcoholic mindset is impossible to deal with. And as a teenager, that's where my fixer came, because I was like, oh, he's my dad, I could fix him, and I'm never going to give up on him. Whereas my siblings were like, no, this isn't good, I'm leaving. And I'm like, good for you guys, but I chose to stay in there, and that's what carried into my relationships. I actually stayed in relationships that were not healthy for me, but I had that mindset of like, I'm gonna fix this, I'm gonna fix this. But no, my dad, um it's actually like, I don't know if you believe in, like, I just believe the universe pushes people to do things. I believe you can believe, everyone believes in a certain spectrum of things, but I'm big believer in like, what's meant to happen is gonna happen, regardless of how horrible it is, because there's always a lesson in it, I feel. I mean, I don't like saying that because you think of like severities of like children getting sick, or sexual abuse and stuff like that. I don't mean those things are meant to happen at all. So maybe, I don't know, in certain things, I guess. But I was driving through Carsland to go to a photo shoot I had, and there's something inside of me, and my gut was like, call your dad. So I called my dad, and didn't answer. So I was like, okay, no worries. Then I did my photo shoot, and then I went back through town, and I called him, and he answered, and he was like angry with me for something I had no idea. Like, I was like, we haven't really talked much. I'm like, I'm not too sure what you're angry with me about. And yeah, and then we started talking, and then it's like, the more I opened up about things that weren't mine to share about things, it's like my inner child was like, ooh, your dad's listening to you. Literally, like, I'm not even kidding you, Kendall. It was like two different people. It was me like being like, oh my God, goody. It's like I was back to like being a child again. And I was like, my dad's listening to me. So I'd share and share and share, because that's what he wanted to hear at the time. And then when I kind of came back to my adult self, and I said, well, hey, this is because of, you're drinking, kind of thing. Boom. He did not like that. He got in his truck, he drove away. He left me standing on a corner of, like, I don't know if you've been to Carsland, but there's like, it's just like, have you been to Carsland?
Yeah, there's only like 4 streets, isn't there?
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, but there's like the main street, and there was a store there, and we're just chatting on the corner of the just in front of the store there, and he literally just like got in his truck, and he drove away from me. And my inner child was like so abandoned. Like, it was weird. Here I am standing there, 28-year-old grown woman, and yet my inner child, my little Alyse, was just heartbroken and sad and heartbroken. It's like, why doesn't your dad want to be with you? Why doesn't your dad like you? Why doesn't your dad want to, be around? It was just a really hard day for me, and that actually led me to my growth. And literally, not even kidding you, the next month my ex and we broke up, of 8 years, and literally, like, just so many huge changes happened, and I literally like was like, the rug was pulled right out underneath me, and I was like knocked on my ass. And um I just had to like, I believe that was the universe, or maybe my mom was like, okay, time for a refresh. But I literally had to learn about all these things, and like, that's what led me to, learn about ADHD and all that stuff as well, and learn about myself. But yeah, I haven't talked to my dad since, and that was
Got
the
chills when you were talking about that. I think it's it's crazy. I also believe that the universe, like if things are not meant to be, the universe finds a way to, I don't want to say mess it up, but that's kind of what ends up happening is they show you, like you said, they pull the rug out from underneath you and now you're on your own and you have
Oh
no
yeah,
other choice. That's just the direction you have to go. And
honestly.
yeah, I during a conversation with my therapist, we actually talked about something that she mentioned childhood and how when we're very young, we figure out what we need to do as children to get approval and love from our parents.
Oh, absolutely. So the kid who's like, "Oh my God, my kid's so bad," it's because you do not validate your child.
And then
You
you
do
continue to do those things. This is what I found so interesting is you keep doing those things and trying to do them because that's the only way that you've ever gotten love. And
not.
until someone sits you down and says, "Hey, Kendall, the reason why you're so adamant about doing this and this is because that's the only time that people paid attention to you." It makes so
Mhm.
much more sense. And it's
Oh,
also
for sure.
heartbreaking. It's
It
heartbreaking.
is, isn't it? Like it when you go to therapy, you really have to be open to like having your heart rebroken essentially, or just learning about these things because it's it's really tough. Like it really is. Like, I was actually watching someone had a home video of I was 2 and it was like a backyard birthday party and all I could hear was my dad. He was loud and he was laughing and he was making jokes and I'm like, "Oh, look who did that as well. That was me too." So I was not validated and I was it's so weird because my mom, like I said, she made me feel like the best person on earth. And then my dad just was present, but he wasn't emotionally present.
Right.
He was, "Oh, you got the roof over your head, you got the groceries, you're going to school, you're fine. Figure it out." The whole this is what I had to do when I was a kid. And it's like, okay, well, let's I'm not you, one. I'm not this isn't then, this is now, and yeah, so my siblings and I were just do not have a relationship with him and it's truly heartbreaking because I still have those moments coming up of engagement, getting married, having kids. Like I want my dad to be there, but you really have to learn to reparent yourself. That's a big one. Is reparent yourself, learn to love life in different ways that you think only your dad could fulfill, and just really like respect yourself, and because you can't change people, and people who don't want to change will not change. And yeah, so anyways, but yeah, it's just it all goes back to your childhood. Like just to wrap that, like my little rant there up, is just you got to go back to your inner child. Even like talk to a 50-year-old person. And like when people talk, if I'm like sitting here talking to you, like when people talk about someone else, like it makes you feel so good. It does. Everyone loves when someone just listens to them. Like it's such a powerful thing to hold safe space for people. Like that's why we have all these suicides. It's like no one felt safe enough to just share, or the words "get over it, you're fine, it's okay, you're good." Those are the things that. And like another thing, like too with ADHD though, is it can be mistaken for depression. That's a big one. Like I don't know if you read up on that, but it's a
I
big.
was actually gonna say I was misdiagnosed with bipolar about
Really?
5 months ago. I went to a therapist. She basically said, "This is classic bipolar." And I'm thinking,
Oh,
what the hell? Like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. I don't think I have bipolar. I'm going down the rabbit hole, researching everything. I'm like, is this? And then I'm like, okay, these symptoms make sense. Maybe I do have it. And then
oh,
fast forward, went to a psychiatrist, and he's like, I don't think you have bipolar. I think you have ADHD and then obviously anxiety and depression, because those things do kind of go hand in hand to some extent. But that was the misdiagnosis side of it, that really screws you up too. Because you
oh,
have a
well,
medical professional telling you that this is what's wrong with you.
for sure.
And it's, yeah, that on its own was a whole shit show. I guess that's
Yeah.
the best way to put it. I have to blur
Oh,
that
that's
out.
tough though, because it's stigma, right? People put such a stigma around things, and it's like, I mean, not saying that that's bad if you did have that, but just like to tell you you have that when you don't, that's, yeah, we exactly where it goes back to where you're saying the trust, right? How do we trust these people? But it's so good to like that you got almost a second opinion in a way.
Well, that was again the universe, I feel, just working out the way it was supposed to. I was actually, she was trying to get me on a medication that same day. And
Oh,
I am so glad that I was not able to get into my family doctor, because who knows what would have happened if I would have
really
been prescribed that. And it's just crazy that there's not, and that's just the reality of our healthcare system, our mental health care system. It's not built to sustain the problems that our society has. It just isn't. It's a quick fix. Get on a medication, get diagnosed as quickly. If you can even get in to see someone, then
mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
straight to the medication. If that doesn't work, God forbid it makes things worse and you're in an even worse spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the biggest problem that we're facing right now, is an epidemic of people not having the resources to be able to help themselves.
For sure. Like, and it, yeah, like for us, like I'm older than you, like 5 years older than you,
Yeah,
I
I'm
think.
22, so
There's buddy, oh girlfriend, I love your life every day. Um, love those good boob years, I'll say that.
oh, I don't have any, so
Oh my God, well, you'll just
good.
love them more now. But um yeah, just I think because I'm I want to have kids, I do, and I want to change that narrative so badly. Like I don't have my parents to talk, like I could talk to my dad, but I'd really have to do deep therapy to be prepared to be potentially disappointed anyway. But where say you could have these conversations with your parents and say, hey, listen, and you can even see adults like older than me. Sometimes I don't feel like an adult, that's why it's so easy to say that, but just see them light up when you're like, when you ask them like, where did you feel safe and when did you not feel safe, and what happened in your childhood, you know what I mean? Because even like their inner child will light up, you know so anyways, but yeah, just being able to change the narrative and stuff like that, and to like see if I have a daughter that she's fidgeting, she's moving around and all this stuff, I could say, oh, okay, let's see here, let's, how do you feel, let's, because you don't want to push meds on the child, obviously, but you also want to find resources that you can, early intervention is what we need everywhere. We should have counselors in school. I know there is counselors in schools, but I just feel like we need to do more. I'm so on your level with we need to do more.
And I think it comes down to that same trauma therapist I chatted with. We'd had a conversation about MAID. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
No.
that. It's the medical assistance in dying program that Canada has. And they recently were, I don't know 100% if it's come into effect. I know that it was pushed back because people wanted to talk about it more, but they were considering changing the regulations and the criteria to enable people with severe mental illness to go through with MAID. And her biggest complaint and I guess issue with the system is, sure, that should be an option, but why is it an option before we give the option of proper help and resource
Exactly.
to
Oh
people?
my
Like,
gosh.
who can afford, what normal person can afford to go to therapy for $250 an hour? And most people, you don't need to go once every 3 months. It's a very consistent thing that has to happen, especially for those that are really struggling. And it's honestly an epidemic, and I don't think things are going to change until, like, we have to be the ones to change that. I
Look what you're
truly
doing
believe
right
that.
now. Kendall, look what you're doing right now. Us having this conversation and being able to share it. Like, yes, maybe say it reaches one person, but say it reaches, over 100. Like this in its own, like it's gonna help. Like we're helping. We're literally doing something right now. And I think that is so powerful. Just talking about it. Like, I know we're not a big, huge corporation that has all this money that can go, and do all this, but us as humans just trying to get by just like everyone else, we're talking about it, and that's all we can do, and it's so powerful.
Going back to, I think the inner childhood talk is a really interesting conversation. What sort of things do you say to little Alyse? What does that look like for you? Is that a regular thing that happens?
It's not, I wouldn't say it's as regular anymore, as I'm at a really good place, but at the beginning, let's say like, so I'll just give you a quick rundown. So I'd say October, November of 2021, or see, I can't even remember. October, November, no, not last, so not this previous, but before. So yeah, 2021. I was the most depressed I've ever been in my life. Like, no showering. I was almost at week 2 of no showering. I was like face to the couch. Like, didn't even sit up to put my head on a pillow. I was just so depressed. Like, I cut off everybody, and that is so unlike me. And this was after my boyfriend and I had broken up, and after I saw my dad. My boyfriend and I broke up in August, and just, yeah, like the months after. But I'm one to, like, if I feel myself getting down, I can pick myself back up. So then that's why I feel like the universe was in there really, really, really pushing me to my absolute low. And then I actually came across from my good friend Courtney. Her and I have actually gone through quite similar journeys. So I've been very lucky to have her actually go through this with me. She doesn't have ADHD, but we went through similar things in similar times. But not with parents either, so I shouldn't say that, just like kind of like breakup deal and stuff like that.
Right.
But I found holistic psychologist on Instagram, and I'm not even kidding you. I listened to the audiobook and that gave me like my glimmer. I like that little piece of me that I knew was there that could pull me out of there. That book, it's called How to Do the Work. I think her name is Nicole LaPera. But she's on Instagram as the holistic psychologist. And I just listened to the audiobook every time and it prompted me to have a shower. So that was fantastic. So it was all around good. But I listened to her audiobook, and she talked about inner child. And I'm like, what the hell is this inner child? Like, what does that mean? And so what I would say to little Alyse is, I would say, like, I'm sorry for what you went through, but I've got you now. And you're safe. When you tell someone they're safe, because like, what do you do when you're in an unsafe place? We shrug our shoulders, we tense up, where cortisol is just freaking shooting through our bodies. And that's where you hold all your trauma. And then as women, we hold it in our hips. Like, it's all in our hips. And you should read up on that, actually. I'm sure you'll be like, holy crap. But yeah, just I literally took my photo, and I just looked at her, and I wrote her a letter too. I wrote not only my little self, I wrote my teenage self too. Because in those times we're hormones, we're boyfriends, we're this, we're that, like, oh, you're fat, you're skinny, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's just so much, right? So yeah, I just like, I looked at my photo, and I separated myself from her that I am now. And I just literally was like, what did she like to do? What did she wear? Like, not that I can like be her again, but I know what she went through, and that's not her fault. If you were to be somewhere and you look at a little toddler, are you going to say, toddler, it's your fault that your parents are alcoholics, or it's your fault that you got abused, it's your fault? No, it's not your fault. You're put into an environment that's unsafe, and it's powerful and to look at yourself in the mirror until you're literally like, this is so uncomfortable. Like, until you're actually looking at somebody else. I did it at work at the courthouse. I would do it every day, at least twice a day. I'd go in the bathroom and say, Alyse, you're safe. I love you. You got this. You can do this. And I would high five myself in the mirror. And I know it sounds crazy, but I literally would not be who I am today without that. And then you feel like you're ready. It's like you're ready to get off that, you're ready to upgrade, or not upgrade, but like, you're ready to move on. But at that odd time when I'm not feeling grounded, or I'm feeling very just like kind of out of body, I'll look myself in the mirror and say, you got this. I'm here for you. We're okay. So when it's like you telling your daughter almost like, or, you know, a little sister or something, like, you're okay, you're safe. I'm proud of you. You know, it's like very grounding and validating. So, because you have to learn to reparent yourself. We should honestly, like, if you wanted to have like a full inner child like talk too, because it's just so powerful. And I think if everybody on this bloody planet went back to their inner child and like figured out where things went the way they went, we would be in a much different place.
I 100% agree with that. And I think, I mean, we live in a generation now that's starting to, the stigma is coming off a little bit, I think. Still not where it needs to be, but now people actually feel as though they can do that sort of stuff. Whereas before it would have been like, you would have been looked at like you're crazy if you would have said, oh, well, you know, I need to look at who I was when I was 10, 11, 12. So I think it is very powerful. And hopefully
Yeah, like,
by bringing this information out, more people can experience what that's like.
yeah, and just like it just takes one thing you hear to be like, "Whoa, wow, that happened to me," or, you know, I can relate with this or something. It just takes one thing, you know. And yeah, like I'm dating a new guy now, and you know, he's from Europe, and it's just so different, like European upbringing opposed to Canadian upbringing too, like the things that they've had to go through. And like, so I'm kind of like teaching him a little bit because of ways of like, because I'm like, oh, he's so funny, like I'm sure he'd be fine with me saying this, but like he has to have things like, I'm like such a like, yeah, I'll show up around this time, like whatever, and like without a plan. And he's like, okay, but so what time are you gonna be here? Okay, are we gonna be going here? Are we gonna like, and I'm just like, why? How come? I'm like, let's talk about this. Like I always say that. I'm like, let's chat. Like, what's going on here? Like, where does this come from? Like, you know, and he's able to be like, oh, like one time I remember at breakfast and he's like, wow, you should like be my therapist or something. He's like, this all makes sense. And I was like, yeah, because you know, he has amazing parents, but I just don't know if they were too like, you know, into the feelings and the, you know, emotions and stuff like that. And especially with a boy, which is unfortunate.
Right.
But I think, yeah, he opens up a lot. And I'm just like, okay, this is good.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Would you say that you're truly happy now or on your way to getting there?
I'd say I'm the happiest I've ever been. And
What was
that's,
the best piece of advice that you ever received?
ooh, you got me. I'd say there's a lot that I can't like pinpoint, but I'd say what comes up is, because I think I've had to personally go through this, is that only put your focus on things you can control, and don't put stress on things you cannot control. You know, we can't, it's funny, like we're okay, you know, we can't control the weather, we can't control, you know, and you know, stuff like that. And but it just, because I always wanted to be in control, but when you just start focusing on what you can control, it just, you know, you feel, I wish I had a better explanation, but for like a really like deep line. But that, I think that is pretty powerful, because a lot of people are just so stressed about external things. And like once you just stop and you focus in on what's truly, truly important in your own life, because time is our currency, time flies and we are the pilot, you know, so we got to really just focus on, you know, what we can control in our lives, and everything else will follow the way it's supposed to.
I think that's a great thing to end on because everybody can appreciate, especially having anxiety. I heard it explained really well, where your body is just conditioned to want to protect you from the things that haven't yet happened.
Absolutely.
And
You're already writing a book about this bad, dark, deep hole you're already going to fall into that you have no idea
yeah, you
exists.
haven't even been there yet, and you're already talking about how the experience was. And I think learning to just, people say this all the time, just sit with yourself
Mm-hmm.
and learn to be with yourself. And that is where you're going to find the most peace and the most happiness, because you can't go back and you can't you can't control what's going to happen in the future. So there's no sense. And that's easier said than done, obviously, as somebody who still is probably going to stress about the million things that I haven't yet to experience. But it's really powerful if you can learn to do that, and you can appreciate just sitting with yourself.
That's what me and my best friend Courtney say. We say you got to feel it to heal it, and the more you resist, the more it persists. So the more you put away all those old men are like, I don't need to go to the doctor. Like, we're from the country. Are you kidding me? There's no, if you're to go out to the field, or you know what I mean, like just to go out there and be like, hey, or to someone who's hurt, no, they'll all be good. I'll be good. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And then it's like, actually now, because of the bone you avoided, getting help for, you put strains into your hips, your back, your everything. It just, the more you resist, more shit persists, and it's just.
And that's exactly what we do with our mental health too. One thing happens, we push it down, we say we're fine, it builds up, and then and then you hit your breaking point, and everyone is like, holy shit, where did that come from?
And you're crazy. Wow, she's crazy. And you're like, no, I just don't deal with my mental health properly.
I just haven't. Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so much power and self-awareness is something I'm working on personally, because I think once you understand yourself, you can understand what triggers you. You can feel when things are starting to change, which I think is very powerful. And it's just like I think everyone can appreciate just sitting with themselves. It's
for sure. Incredible. And Rachel Hollis, if you know who Rachel Hollis is, she's an author who wrote Girl Wash Your Face.
Yes.
She has a tattoo that says sit in your shit, because you have to. If you don't sit in it, you're not going to heal it, and you can't. Oh, what's that line I think I have here? I'll just say this quick, is we cannot solve our personal issues with other people's solutions. Like someone could easily say, I would do this, I would do that, but sorry, it doesn't work for me. So sit in your shit, use your own, go off your own gut feeling, your intuition, trust yourself on how you feel. Obviously, sometimes people need more help, but go to therapy. Everybody needs therapy.
I agree.
I honestly,
now we just need something that allows people, like, BetterHelp is not it. I am going to say that right now. I don't think it's a good step in the right direction, but it is not. We need more.
Oh, absolutely. We need more, for sure.
But this has been honestly amazing, and I am so appreciative that you took the time to sit down with me. I think this is going to be a very impactful episode for a lot of people to hear, and I do appreciate your time and you opening up.
And I'm glad this was long, because I feel like it's such a deep topic, and it's like, it's not just a quick little 30-minute little snippet. It's just this honestly came at a perfect time for me, because I've always been wanting to share, and this is why I will be creating my podcast as well, is because I can't go on my photography page and be like, hey, you got inner child trauma you want to talk about? Oh, by the way, I could take your family photos, so, but yeah.
So where can people find you if they wanted to follow you, or just reach out to you? Maybe they do want to get some pictures done, or
love chatting, love taking photos. So my main Instagram account is my name, so it'll be at Alyse Lakeman Photography, and for all things like branding, family, babies, maternity, it's at Alyse Lakeman Lifestyle.